Well, what a Giro. I hope you were watching. How's stage 20? Simon Yates getting the ultimate redemption on the stage that took his dreams in 2018. And we can't forget about the huge ride of the Australian Chris Harper from Jaco Alula, the first to go over the Col de Finestra, the Chima Copy, in honour of Fausto Copy, not Coppa Bartoli, the race that I was telling everyone last week in the Communique quiz. And well, taking his first stage win in that rad map kit. So cool. Well, guys, this is Life in the Peloton, and I'm your host, Mitch Docker, and we are being brought to you by the Melbourne cycling apparel brand MAP, the guys behind this badass purple kit of Jaco Alula. MAP are kicking off a global series of women-led riders and experiences, the Radical Women of Cycling, for the next month. And this year, they are the proud partner with the Cyclist Alliance, the independent voice of women's professional cycling. Let's hear from their new president, Grace Brown.
Hi, Mitch and Life in the Peloton listeners. Grace Brown here to explain a bit about the Cyclist Alliance. We are an association that represents the interests of the women's professional peloton at the UCI level. So we provide legal services to our members, which includes anything related to their contracts or issues with teams, ethical issues. Then we also offer career development, education, mentorship for riders at various stages of the career. And finally, we advocate for equity in the sport, fairer working conditions, and greater visibility of women's races. So basically, we're on a mission to, drive the sport forward on the women's side. We've been involved in minimum salaries and maternity leave in the past, and continue to fight for those things that aren't quite there yet. There's still plenty to work on. So really excited that MAP is supporting TCA in this Radical Women of Cycling event. So if you can, join one of the rides or events, donate to the Cyclist Alliance. We'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, that's right. From June 12th to July 13th, it's all about championing women and women identifying cyclists in safe and welcoming spaces. From pro-led rides to local experiences, MAP will be matching all donations up to $10,000 on a shared goal to raise over $20,000 in support of greater equality, opportunity, and representation in the sport. Well, with the Giro over, it's time to focus on the main event, the Tour de France. And in this episode, we've got a very map-based feel because I'm chatting with the Western Australian riding on Jaco Alula, Ben O'Connor. Ben has just moved over to the Australian squad this year after having a glorious season last year, notching up some early wins and then almost stealing the Vuelta España win from right underneath Primož Roglic's nose. He spent a total of 13 days in the red jersey after taking that heroic solo victory on stage 6, but unfortunately he lost it with just 3 days to go. Nevertheless, Ben O'Connor has finished 4th at the Tour de France back in 2021 and 4th at the Giro last year, as well as winning a stage in all 3 Grand Tours. He's arguably one of Australia's most consistent Grand Tour GC men ever. Well, with changing squads, Ben is hoping to climb up onto the podium at this year's tour, but which step will it be? So I thought, what a great chance to grab him at his final altitude camp before he hits the Tour de France in a few weeks' time. Now, you guys can try this one and still listen to me. I'm sure you would have seen them on another cyclist or someone running past you, running down the street, because these are going crazy, and for good reason too. I'm talking about Shokz. Shokz are the world's leading open-ear pioneers. Want the most comfortable and safest headphones for cycling? Well, here you go. Shokz are bone-conducting headphones. Well, what does that mean? I can hear you asking. Well, instead of headphones resting inside your ear canals like conventional headphones, they rest in front of your ears on your cheekbones, which allows your ear to remain open So you can both hear ambient noise sounds like traffic, birds chirping, dogs barking, or even your coach yelling at you while you're listening to music all at the same time. It's crazy, and I'm sure you're thinking, how can that be? Well, I was skeptical too. But it's so weird. You just have to try them to sort of understand because the sound vibrates through your cheekbones, bypassing eardrums. Look, try these out, guys. Cycling, running, whatever you're doing, actually, it's great to have awareness on what's going on around you. If you already have a pair of shock headphones, you know what I'm talking about, but it's time to upgrade. Open Pro Run 2 are now out with great improvements. Previously, there's been a little bit of chat around about the sound quality wasn't as good as in-ear headphones because of how the sound was transmitted through your cheekbones. Well, try these puppies out. The Open Pro Run 2s are a vast improvement. Great sound quality. Now with 4 different EQ modes where you can change depending on what you're listening to or just customize your own EQ mode. Updated microphones, so now in a low wind position, you can make phone calls while you're out running and exercising, and everyone can still hear what you're saying with this great new feature. Like I said before, guys, if you want the most comfortable and safest headphones for cycling, running, or whatever you get up to, then get on board. Shokz.com.au, that's shokz.com.au, and just make sure you punch in the code LITP for a special listeners only discount. That's LITP. Well, guys, kick back. Here we go. The Australian Ben O'Connor. Let's get G'd for the Tour de France. All right, well, mate, Ben O'Connor, 29 years old, mate, 9th professional season. How long do you reckon this career is going to go on for, buddy? The big question straight up.
I reckon aim is 36. I think that's like a pretty acceptable number. And then see where you go from there.
Did you base that off my career, did you?
I feel like it's hard to look past that because already that'd be another 7 years or 6 years. And that's a fair old chunk. I reckon by that point you probably start to get a little tired. Maybe your role changes as well. Never know. Maybe it could be like G and just be good till you're like 40, but I don't know. I think it's a hard task.
Well, like the roles have already shifted for you, and now you're coming into the most sort of, I guess, mentally challenging years where it's like you've got the expectation of what you've already done, personal expectation, then you've got the team expectation, you've got the public expectation, all this sort of stuff. And now you're like, all right, I've got to back it up. I've got to, literally twist a nut every training. I've got to really hone in on all the little details. Like, I guess the feeling before now is like building up to what am I going to be? And now you sort of arrived at, this is who I am. This is the level that I'm going to be. Of course, you still grow a bit from here, but you're starting to get to the cream of your career. And then that's, I guess, mentally taxing. Have you sort of noticed that shift now when you think about it?
I reckon it comes with more responsibility, but in one way, you're not really searching for anything because or A, you've done it before, and B, you know how to get there. So actually, in essence, for me, it's actually slightly an easier mental battle to try and go forward against. Whilst I think beforehand, you're always looking at where can you get yourself to? Actually, how good are you? What is your capabilities? At what tier you're going to find yourself at? It obviously fluctuates, but people have different calibers, different physiologies, and some people just are not race winners, and they're helpers and domestics for life, and that's just how it is. It's just the truth to it. So yeah, I actually don't find this period too bad, but when you're a bit shit, that's a bit rough because you know how far off you are from your best.
It's interesting you say that because at the end of the day, we're all winners. When I say we, I talk about cyclists, professional cyclists, past and present. We're all winners to get into the World Tour. I don't think anyone starts at the amateur level and riding and, I'll just talk about the three-day tour here in Lansfield. Yeah, I'm just a domestique. I'm just going to be working for, the other guy in the race. Like everyone's in a winner to get to the World Tour. I don't care who you are. Some guys are prolific winners. Others are just sort of get a couple good races. But that transition, as you mentioned, does happen when you get to the World Tour. You find your spot. Do you think that is a mentality thing that people actually understand, you know what, it drives me more to be a domestique and actually know? I think of a guy like Caleb Ewan who was unbelievably driven by the white line fever.
Mhm.
And when he didn't have it, he was sort of almost useless as a teammate. But
Mhm.
when he was on, he was unstoppable. So is it a mentality switch? Because like what I'm trying to say is that once upon a time we're all winners, and then all of a sudden now it's like, well, I just talk to myself. I enjoyed being a domestique, so I wonder what the hell that was.
I mean, you do in the World Tour, you jump into a pretty big pond. So obviously you're never really going to be the best in the end, are you? There's only like 5 guys that are the best in the world, otherwise the rest of us are still kind of always chasing.
Mm.
But I think as well, it comes with that level of responsibility and the kind of like weight on your shoulders of expectation when you are, let's call it the leader in
Mm.
particular, because it's something that a lot of people don't like. And you take a ton more sacrifice. I think hard to say to compare because I'd say someone like you, for example, would do far more race days than I do
Mm-hmm.
during your like time in the season. But I'd probably do far more, if all the whole altitude camps and recon stuff and all the testing and wind tunnel and equipment stuff. So it kind of like you do spend a bit more time away from home, and there's
Mm.
different circumstances that make it something that someone will actually enjoy to do. I mean, you can look at like someone like Rafa Michael, who's always had the capabilities, for example, to
Mm.
be one of the better GC guys, bar the TT situation, but he doesn't really care at all over the last 3, 4 years at all. He's just like ripping it up, and then Pog or Ayuso or someone else just blast off the front, and then he pulls the pin, and then that's it. So he has the capabilities there, but doesn't want the responsibility.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it sounds like a bit of a cop out for a guy, especially like a guy like Rafa Micah, and maybe people see it as that. Oh yeah, this guy he just wanted to half-ass it, but that's not underestimating the job that he does. It's a
Mm.
mentality
He still
thing.
has to, he still has to be there when there's 5, 6 guys left.
Yeah, exactly. What something that I never experienced myself is being an all-out team leader, GC rider. I had the off
hmm
chance in a one-day race, which is a different scenario. But get us inside a little bit what that's like. That build up, having the team behind you, not only the riders, but the staff, the supporters and everyone outside. What's it like when you've got that, I guess, that expectation or maybe that pressure, but it could be positive pressure as well.
Yeah, I think first you have to get everyone to trust you. So
Mm.
you have all these like training camps, and you have to come to the boys and to the people who are here at the camp, or that you're good enough that they can then sacrifice their race in certain, stages for you. Um, it's completely different if you have like end up wearing the leader's jersey because everyone then is obviously clearly working for a common goal, and everyone knows then when you're leading a race, then like that's what you do. That's what you work for as a team. But when you're fighting for like a stage race top 5 or something like this, the boys really have to believe that what they're doing is actually going to be worthwhile, and they're doing it for someone that
Mm.
they don't necessarily have to be best mates with their leader, let's call it, but at least like them enough and get along and and trust that they'll be able to actually get the job kind of done. Otherwise, all your sacrifice of your race, all the danger that you put yourself in as a domestique
Mm.
becomes kind of meaningless.
Mm.
So that's a pretty tricky one to kind of like manage. In the end, I mean, your legs have to do the talking, but you have to also just not fuck up. Just don't make
Mm.
mistakes often in races. I think as a team, there'd be nothing worse than working for like a leader guy who just gets piped in the crosswinds every day or sits too far back all the time, and then you're always trying to chase him and look after him and come
Mm.
back to the front of the peloton. I think in particular this kind of like situation is something that as a teammate or as a team they would absolutely hate you for if you
Mm.
did it too often. So something I definitely try to do myself. We're never really too much on the back foot because it's something that your teammates never really rate.
Totally, and and you do see that with riders like this is the way I want to ride, and you just, of course, it's got to suit you, and you don't want to be sitting up and in a position you don't want to be and making you feel uncomfortable. But there's a bit of give and take, isn't there?
Okay, yeah,
Sometimes
because
it's
often you got the capabilities then normally as as the better guy in the team or in the race that you can move up when it gets real hard. But for your teammates, that might not be possible. So it's
mm.
like you really fist them, and then they just do your leader just comes up on the climb, moves up all by himself, and then you're stuck back there, obviously trying to help him at some point, and then he just goes off, and you're like, oh, now I'm stuck.
You just described it in so many scenarios for me working with the Yates. Bloody hell.
Yeah. I'm being coached by Yates's old coach, Josh.
Right.
So it's been plenty of story.
One thing that is important, I think, and you sort of alluded to it there, is that, you've got to have the trust with the riders. I want to talk about coming back to Greenedge. Well,
Mm,
not coming back to Greenedge, coming across to Greenedge, a 2-year deal with the Australian team. Coming home is what I wanted to say almost. Like, how important is this as an Aussie rider to come to the Australian team? Maybe it doesn't mean anything to you. Or one of those things too, what I wanted to say is, now being in this environment, is it easier to sort of, I guess, gain that trust, or sort of, really get the other riders to sort of get to know you? You can relax, be yourself a little bit more. Yeah, how's it been?
Straight up, the commitment within the group of boys as being like selfless workers is already being like top notch. There's absolutely no qualms or no kind of like soft assing or kind of
Mm,
faking working hard. I think that's one of the excellent things I've seen so far. It's just been, I guess, my own legs that have kind of let that story down a little bit. But in terms of coming to Green Edge, it was something I always wanted to do in general throughout my career was race for the team because I never had an offer over my career to be at Greenedge. So there was obviously never the opportunity to go there. And it was something that I really wanted to just do at some point. You know, it is the only Aussie team. And I think just that it's so nice when you have that common ground of working with other Aussies. There's just some
mm,
sort of click when you speak with people from your own nationality that people don't really it's you don't really you only understand it once you move over to Europe
mm.
and you miss your own, I guess maybe your own people, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's been probably one of the more exciting things. And it doesn't really feel like you're fighting any uphill battle with just like communication. Remember, I've actually deserved for 4 years, and communication was one of like the main things that was always a bit of a struggle.
Mm.
Plus, obviously, it's just straightforward. It's just easy. It just feels like normal life, and it's one thing that you miss when you live in Europe. Just being around Aussies. I wish I could be a pro and live in Australia. It would be, yeah, my life would be far, far better if I could do that. But that's not the case. So you live a more interesting life, perhaps. But I do wish you could live in Australia and do this job. So being at Green Edge is probably the closest you can get to that scenario.
Have you thought about that? I've actually thought about that a few times. Is that living in Australia, I don't know if I would have been a better pro. And obviously, you wouldn't know any different. But I sort of weirdly didn't mind the whole, this was my racing life. And then this was my like relaxing life. And I felt like
Mhm.
if those two worlds came together, maybe I wouldn't be able to juggle both of them.
It's actually, yeah, it is true. I think it might be harder to knuckle down. I mean, I live in
Yeah.
Andorra and it's not like there's nothing going on, but there's less going on than it would be living back in, Perth City Centre. So I think there'd be like, let's call it less temptation, um, to have more, pleasure, as you said, whilst living in Andorra is a little bit different. So I think, yeah, it's a curious one. I think my wife would disagree. I think she'd want to definitely live back there.
Well, that you got to see the first hand, and you spoke about AG2R. All those guys are, well, not all, but a lot of them are coming from European homes, and probably still living in their hometown or not far away, or on the
Mhm.
weekend they can go back, or next week they're going back home to see their parents. They don't miss all the weddings, the parties, whatever it is. Think about here in Australia, and you think of AFL football, and that comparison. That's, I guess, the most thing we can talk about is that those guys, they're here. They make small moves, whether they have to play over in WA for a team there and move from
Mhm.
Victoria or vice versa. I don't know. I'm just trying to think about it. Obviously, there is massive pros with it, but you think it really is that beneficial when you've seen the Europeans? You see what they do.
Yeah, you could take it or leave it. It really goes 50-50, to be honest. I think in the end, you being a professional cyclist, you live a pretty curious life living in Europe and going through all those hurdles. And I've got an Australian wife, and obviously that was also another like thing to jump through
Mm.
and to try and like overcome. So there's plenty of things that probably make you far more resilient doing this kind of scenario living in Europe. and just immersing yourself rather than being back in Australia. But yeah, I would still take it. I miss the beach. I miss
Mm.
actually I just miss the beach a lot. It would be ideal if I could live next to the beach somewhere.
Mate, take me to you've won a stage in all three Grand Tours. That is a feat that a lot of riders strive their whole career to do, and you ticked them off pretty quickly. 2020, the Giro, the next year, 2021, a stage of the Tour de France, and then last year in the Vuelta, a stage in the Vuelta, and an epic win that one in the Vuelta. I was very proud to be able to commentate that here in Australia. Take
Yeah.
the red jersey after that and put Primoz Roglic on the back foot. What stands out for you, mate? Out of all of them, I know it's a hard question. What one was the easiest, the best, the most memorable? Give us a bit of a rundown on those three victories.
I reckon the hardest was the tour because of the day was like just the worst day in the Alps, with the rain and the cold and it was freezing. That was a shit day, but I won, so it was like fantastic, but it was a bit too shocking. Um, the Giro one, yeah, it was also tricky. Kind of feels like a lifetime ago, actually, that stage win from
Mm,
the breakaway. But it kind of all came together on the final climb, and it's pretty straightforward. You just jump and then you do your own solo business. Yeah, the Vuelta one was probably, well, if you're going to say the easiest, it was actually the easiest one because I was in control the whole time. It was once I made the group and we had the gap, I was fairly sure I'd be pretty close to winning the stage just because of how
wow.
I felt in that day. I just was ultra confident in how the legs were responding. I was like, right, well, if I'm like this, often it means I'll be pretty close to winning unless there's someone who's on the same level. So yeah, especially once it got away, then it was like pretty set because
Mm,
you look at what you're doing and then you have to just try to think, what are the boys doing behind? And
mm.
it would have to be a lot to catch up, right? So yeah, that's probably how they all rank. So that's why the Vuelta was probably the most enjoyable one. Not because it was the easiest, but because it felt like you were completely in control of your
Mm,
race of that stage from not from the gun, because I missed the break and I was pretty devo. But once I finally got there, yeah, it was by far the best day I reckon I've had on the bike. hmm Yeah, I'd say that.
the progression of that, and as yourself as a pro, you can sort of see that. Like by the time you came to that Vuelta stage, when you were just more accomplished pro, you'd done quite a lot
Mhm.
already in your career, and you know the feelings. You were more in tune to your own body. You knew what you had to do to win. It sounds sort of that's how it's come together there.
Yeah, you didn't make any mistake at all. I did
Mm,
that stage in the tour. I was way too cold. I couldn't feel my hands at all on this long descent of Rosalon, and got dropped on the descent, and it was just all a blur.
mm,
That whole day it was just pretty much just riding strong all day. Whilst this one was a bit more calculate how are we working together as a group. Can you afford to go long? Would it be worth it? Can you actually hold it off? Even if you're by yourself, could you actually do it? So, yeah. And then you have the whole fueling situation with the heat and making sure you're always on top. And it was really good. It worked out. I was never short of any fuel or any water or any drink during that stage. It was never any point where you were like, I'm going to blow because I'm way too hot.
What about last year? Last year was a bit of a breakthrough. Well, not a breakthrough year, but an epic year, really. It was a big year. You had that second in the Vuelta trying to hang on to the red jersey. Tell me a little bit about that when you took that red jersey, well, the leader's jersey, in case anyone doesn't know, the leader's jersey. 4 minutes you won that stage by, I think, or 5 minutes, and took the jersey by 4 minutes. What was the idea there? Because it was about the stage. Did you come in to ride GC because you fell off GC earlier in the race because of the heat, and were you disappointed and then turned to stages, and then ultimately you're back in the jersey? Run us through what was happening there.
Yeah, so pretty much the run of the mill was going in for GC. My coach was sure I was going much better than I was at the Giro a couple months ago. So I was like kind of unsure because we had a newborn girl and I was living in Barcelona for a while because she had care over there. And it's not like the ideal prep compared to most guys who would have gone to altitude and all that jazz. So yeah, I had a shocker of a TT, like just was terrible. And then Portugal was hot and a couple normal stages, had this mountaintop then I think it was stage four perhaps or five.
Mm.
And yeah, same thing. Just got way too hot, absolutely detonated. And I remember Felix. So this gal jumping off the front, I could see him in the distance on this cobble like road. I was like, holy shit, man! If you ride like this, you're gonna win the race because he was
Mm.
just. It looked so easy. And then pretty much the directors were like, we're still running for Ben, but like if it's a group of 30, Ben, have a look. But
Mm.
ideally, don't do anything. But yeah, from that day, I was like, I don't know. It was literally just a personal choice of I want to get in front. I've got absolutely nothing to lose. I'd signed to come to Jayco for the following year. I'd been fourth in the Giro and I'd already won one race before in Murcia and no, two actually in UAE as well. So like I'd had a
Mm.
successful start of the year. So I didn't almost care, even though the team was really very clear the focus was for GC for me. But yeah, I kind of went out on a whim on that kind of day and didn't really think anything about a red jersey. I couldn't care less. It was to win the stage because, as you said, you wanted to get that tricolor of the Giro Tour of Welter kind of stage win situation. So it was like that was one thing I actually came to the race as a little like mini goal
Mm.
within the within my mentality because you know what Love Welter's like. It's often opportunist kind of wins that can happen, and it was something that was always playing pretty much there. So when you had the red jersey, obviously it's a huge shock. I mean, you never expect ever to lead, a Grand Tour. So especially by that margin, and then obviously the race completely changes on your mind, and you think, shit, if I do well and I just control each climb, you'd be pretty close to winning the race. Even though I never believed I'd win it, I always thought Primoz was going to catch me at some point. It would be really close if I did my best day every day, which is what I didn't do, sadly, but got close enough.
I love the shift in mentality. What's it like that leading the race and thinking like, okay, this is it? Does it creep in? Do you allow it to creep in? The thought of I can maybe win this, or you just don't let it creep in?
No, there's definitely you can definitely think about it because it's not like I haven't done anything in the past. I've been fourth Giro, fourth in the tour, so it's not like your shit. And I had a
Mm.
really shocker on this like super hot day, so I think it was a bit of like a extrapolated outlier because of just the heat and it was a filthy day. So you never really, by this stage that I won, had like a normal stage to see how you were actually
Mm.
moving. So then the possibilities are completely open. And yeah, it was just a wave of like frustration and then satisfaction on each
Mm.
hilltop or mountaintop because you'd have days where you couldn't do it and fair enough. And then other days where you could hold on, you didn't lose any time. And then it was like pure satisfaction. But no matter what, wearing the jersey was just like a huge level of pride, pretty much.
Mm.
It's you have the whole routine after the stage of anti-doping and media and conferences, and you're always kind of separated almost from the team because you don't actually get on the bus with them much, to be honest,
Mm.
unless you're like super quick. So you live in this like other little like sheltered world almost in one way, which was just wild. And it was the most team feeling I've ever felt. It was by far because
Oh.
you had a huge common goal. The boys were sacrificial. No one got in the break to look at their own chances throughout the time that I was wearing the red jersey.
Huh.
And that was a huge moment because normally with Decathlon As You Deserve is always a double thing of GC, but we're there to win stages always from breakaways.
Mm.
And the team was good at working for one guy, but the boys always had their own personal goals, which as they should do. But this was absolutely on the flip side of 100% sacrifice and commitment to the cause, and that was one of the proudest moments and one of the best moments about the whole race itself was just that mentality. It was such a fantastic way to end with the team because
Mm.
it literally cannot be better than that.
That's perfect. That's exactly what I was about to ask is how was it to end with the team? But you wrapped it up really well there, mate. Well, if you're sitting back listening to this thinking to yourself, well, I might actually go across to the tour this year. Or you've just got a trip planned in the near future and you want to save money on those ridiculous roaming fees. Plus, maybe improve your connection whilst you're on the move and protect your privacy while you're browsing, then you need to take a look at this week's show sponsor, Saily. From the same guys who brought you NordVPN, Saily is an eSIM service app with plans in over 190 countries that gives you an affordable coverage without having to go out and look for a local SIM wherever you're traveling. Or even worse, paying some outrageous daily roaming fee with your existing mobile network. Look, over the last few years, I've been traveling back and forth to Europe for the Tour de France and other commitments, and I have been hit with some very expensive and quite data restricting roaming plans with my Australian phone network. I wish I had been on the Saily wagon much sooner. All you got to do is simply download the Saily app on your device, purchase a plan that offers the coverage you need wherever you're traveling, install the eSIM, and that's it. You're off and away. With Saily, an eSIM only needs to be installed once, so as a user, you don't have to install a new eSIM in each country. You can eliminate roaming fees with affordable eSIM plans, and just like NordVPN, you can change your virtual location, block miscellaneous ads, and stay safer with web protection. It's an all-in-one package. The best of all, Saily offers 24/7 support for whatever your query is, and you can get a full refund if your device isn't an eSIM compatible. If you want to check out Saily on your next trip, then just download the Saily app and use the code PELOSURF to get 15% off your next data plan, or head across to www.saily.com/PELOSURF. That's PELOSURF, and get your discount for just being a Life in the Peloton listener. Because I love being able to share this with you guys, so follow the link in the show notes and check this awesome offer out, and also get your mates over to Saily too. Guys, let's get back to this episode, and you guys, after that, I'll let you book your ticket across to France for the tour. I want to go back to Subiaco, Perth. What's it like over there? What's the scene like for riding? You're a bit late into the game, so tell us about what it's like being back in Perth, where you're from.
Yeah, I just think to start riding there is a fantastic place. You know, it's kind of the ocean on one side, and you have a big river, and pretty much all the suburbs that roll along the river are, we'll call it affluent, but they're big roads. They're not too busy, and you just kind of more or less ride around there to start your whole cycling situation. The bike lane situation and infrastructure is fantastic. That runs near the freeway and along the train lines, and they're massive. And it's full of not just of people who want to race bikes or ride bikes with the bunchies. It's also just the commuter, kind of like people going to work on bikes because it's so easy and accessible. It's also pretty flat to roll around going into the city. So obviously, for a lot of normal people who are heading to work, it's actually such a fantastic way to get out and not be in traffic. So it's always a bit of a crazy, mind-blowing situation when you go back. It's like, between 6 and 7 in the morning, just the amount of people on bikes rolling around past, like, close to the river. Like, I've never seen anywhere like it. I'd love to see like a stat on the amount of people on bikes in the morning in Perth, because it's a pretty amazing and fantastic culture that's rolling around. So yeah, I love it there. Honestly, it's one of my favorite places to ride in general, and it's not just from being biased. I love the river and love being close to the ocean, and that kind of gritty, hot vibe that you get out towards the hills is also kind of charming.
What was it like seeing the Nationals there this year, and that reflection that you got to race in your own you got to see the riders racing in their own area of the roads that the people that you would have seen riding in, the reflection of what it was like.
I was jealous 'cause I wish I was there, but I'll be there next year. I think the course is good fun around Kings Park. It's an iconic place, to be honest. I think it's one of the biggest parks in a city centre CBD area, even in the world. So
is that fact? Is it? Or have you just pulled that out
I'm
of the
pretty
bag?
sure. I'm pretty sure it is. You have to have a look.
Right.
But I thought it was one of the bigger CBD city centre parks in the world rolling around. Anyway, you spent your childhood kind of, well, not childhood, but my start of my cycling career doing TTs up and down Lufkin Road, and yeah, you're just proud. You're always proud of your city and where you come from, and it's a place that I've always loved. So when you see it on TV, because like you see all these fantastic places in Europe on television, and guys get proud because the race goes past their region and they do this climb and this mountain pass, and it looks stunning. So when you see your own city then in that kind of position, you always are like, wow, that's cool. Love that place and I miss it.
It was just perfect to see Big Derbs take it out, wasn't it? The king
Yeah, that
of
was
Perth.
fitting. You couldn't have written the script any better, to be honest. I was so happy for him. And
Yeah.
I mean, there'd be no one prouder to wear that jersey, to be honest. He wears it on his heart pretty much every day. So I absolutely love it. He deserved it.
Yeah, he totally did. He totally did. Mate, take us back because there was a bit of chat after the Netflix series got dropped. What was that like having those guys on board at the Tour de France last year? Oh, sorry, year before.
The guys who actually did the filming and the sound are great, great people. They're actually like
Mm,
really cool. It's just the whole editing situation and the out of context kind of throw-ins that are really annoying, to be honest.
mm.
And you do get the sense of true frustration because that's obviously what I had during that race, and it was a pretty tricky time I had with the team in general at that point because just communication. They couldn't accept the fact that I just wasn't moving well enough to do GC, and that whole scenario for this, I think it was season two, is what it was. They really struggled to like just comprehend that kind of situation and fucking just focus on something else, but they couldn't do it. I guess you get a sense of that, but then some of the other things are just like stupid in the in the series. It'd be like radio messages, but they're from completely different stages, and they try and link it all together to be in that one moment where it's not even relatable. So
Yeah.
yeah, bit of an annoying thing. I won't be doing anything like that. I mean, it won't be happening again, but I definitely won't do anything like that ever again. Absolutely, you just
Yeah,
expose
right.
yourself too much to criticism from other people. Pretty much, it's like reading comments. Just don't do it. Just leave it. Most people are friendly, but yeah, it can be social media and how people judge and think, judge you as a person, how you run yourself or conduct yourself. They're based on images that they see from a TV show when they take a tiny glimpse without any context, and then that's just a bit frustrating.
How have you found it? Has it affected the way that you conduct yourself now in front of the media and you feel like you've got to be slightly more reserved or anything like that? Or has it affect the way that you race or any way?
I think I'm probably still pretty true to myself in most interviews and situations, but yeah, you learn how you deal with the media a lot better
Mm,
in that situation. You also get much better at saying no.
yeah.
You learn to be like, not today, definitely not today, and just
Yeah.
just try and not say anything because yeah, that can be the big issue because there's nothing worse than having a spray and then big article coming up saying, old mate said this, and
Mm.
yeah, you need to avoid that just from the personal criticism kind of point because then you got old mate who just types on the keyboard and all that kind of jazz.
Help everyone understand in the world of cycling, well, from my experience anyway, how much media training the professional sportsmen get, or pro riders get.
Zero.
Exactly.
Absolutely zero. And it's just like you finish the race, you're full of adrenaline, and you're normally pretty pumped at kind of most finishes, no matter what, because you reach some sort of physical limit. And then the camera's right in your face directly after the
Mm.
stage, and you would have exerted yourself to your max, and then people want to see you talk immediately after, Go out and do that straight after your marathon or your half marathon. Go blast yourself, and then 3 minutes later tell me to conduct an interview live on TV for everyone to watch. And you got to be able to think how you're gonna construct your sentence. What are you gonna say? In particular, when things don't go well. So yeah, I think the media aspect is something you have to learn on the go, and
Mm.
I've had experience now finally to be able to manage yourself. But that's the one thing with the Netflix thing. They can kind of be wherever. They could have microphones in the bus, and you don't know. You come in from after the stage, you just get into the bus, and it's normally your safe spot, and then the camera's just like fucking right there, and it's one thing that really
Mm.
annoys you because
Horrible.
it's hard to escape and find your own little point. Or you cross the line, you don't want to speak to any interviewers, and you're trying to roll back, and you're with the Swanee. You just you know you need some sort of release sometimes to speak, and then the camera's right there, and they use that grab of audio, and it's just like, damn it.
I would
Um,
hate that.
yeah. So that whole media training thing was like a pretty much just a on the go kind of experience. And as you said, we as writers don't get any teach or you get no learning from anyone pretty much. That's why everyone's interviews are so boring often. We will see, we will see, we will see. You know, it's the worst sentence, but it's so vague and just passes the question on.
Mate, you give some of the best interviews because you're honest, and that's what I've really enjoyed about you in the last couple of years.
I made like a really clear little thing in my mind was not to say we will see. We will see how today plays out. That kind of is like one sentence that's a huge pet peeve because it's so vague and just say yes, no, or I don't know. Could be this, but in the end, you'll find out at the finish line, something like that. Just don't be so vague.
How has fatherhood changed your life, mate? It's a new thing when you're racing.
Mm.
Has it? Have you lost years off your career because of it, or have you given you more motives?
No, it definitely doesn't lose. If anything, last year was probably more of a motivator because you're working then for your family. You're talking about like a resign. Well, I didn't resign. I signed for Greenedge, but it was a motivator for okay. In the end, you have your personal aspirations, but in the end, also it's your family that you're working with and for, and you're working for your career. So, how far is that going to take you? How much are you going to be able to earn in this very short time? Because in the end, when I retire, bam, basta, that's it. You know, I've got no
Mm,
other qualifications. I'm a professional athlete, and yeah, I was a good one, but in the end, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a physio, so I can't just like slip in and work wherever I want, you know? So you have to be able to maximize that time, this time frame. And now that it's for your family, it's an extra little like
mm,
motivator. Because what's going to guarantee when you move back to Oz that I can then be, you know, happy with my way of life. So yeah, I think in that sense, it's been actually more motivating rather than being
mm,
detrimental to performance. And I guess you probably yeah, you see her on like on the phone and with photos and stuff, and then you do begin to miss them more and more especially as they grow up. So that's been really interesting to see over especially the last couple months, to be honest. And now is a really busy time because
mm,
I'm up here in Sierra Nevada for 23 days, come
mm.
home for 3 or 4 days, then I go to Swiss, which is 8-day race, 2 days before, 10 days, a week at home afterwards, and then you go to the tour. So then another month. So it's a pretty long period that you're away from. And yeah, that's what it's starting to get to that point where you're like, missed that. I
Yeah.
think you probably enjoy the time when you're at home now more so than you did beforehand.
Mm. Make the most of it, don't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Mate, you brought the tour up. We're not too far away. You're doing the final preparations up at altitude camp now before you go in and do the last races before the Tour de France. 2025 Tour de France. Is Poggy beatable? That's the big question, I guess. And what are you thinking about it?
I don't know if Taddy's beatable. It's only be if something goes wrong in the first week. Otherwise, I'd be pretty surprised. And then otherwise for the tour, it's a race of two halves actually, to be honest. Is
Mm,
what, 8 days of just super punchy, extremely nervous stages. And then from then on in, you have just pretty much only 40-minute to 1 hour climbs, in general. Um, every mountaintop is extremely long.
mm.
Bordercamp, Superbanyas, Ventoux, La Plagne, they're Col de Loz from Courchevel side. So like it's all crazy long climbs. So yeah, it's a funny race because it's so split into two very different little like segments. So yeah, week one, survive, positioning, don't fuck up. And then on the big climbs, just do your thing. Pace yourself, don't overdo it because they're so long.
What do you think of the two time trials? You've got a flat time trial and an uphill time trial. Thoughts of those?
So that one's really straightforward. I like those. It's kind of nice to do
Mm,
like just a straightforward, simple TT because a lot of the modern day TTs are pretty hilly, and you have to like you break it down into. I mean, that's at least how I work it into not an interval session, but almost into segments of like 5 or 6 different pieces. So you got a set power for this one, set power for that one, set power for this one, and it's all broken up. It's almost like doing an interval session. Whilst when you do a pretty straightforward flatter TT, you're kind of pretty much only on one interval, one set, with some micro fluctuations. But in the end, it's super straightforward. The mountain TT is pretty interesting. It's one of those annoying ones because I went and saw it a couple weeks ago, and you have this kind of flattish start with a little berg, a descent with a switchback, go through a town, and then goes uphill again for like a couple hundred meters before you then start the climb proper. But it's kind of that awkward length where you could start on the TT bike and change bike, but you probably don't get enough time to be able to change, if that makes sense, for it to be
Yeah.
worthwhile. You might save some watts, but in the end, you have the extra stress of changing bike, which is always just not a fun experience because you're just nervous and don't want to do that. So it's a funny TT. You could do the climb on the TT bike if it was light enough, your frame was tiny, and maybe you could get away with it, but you have to be pretty comfortable on it. So yeah, it's a funny old TT. It'd be interesting to see all the different setups. There'll be guys that stay on the TT bike. There'll be guys that'll have clip-ons. There'll be people just on road bikes with discs, and then there'll be people who change bikes. So it'll be interesting to see what everyone does.
What do you think at this point?
I reckon I'm going to stay just on one bike. I reckon I'm going to stay on the road bike.
Disc wheel?
Yes, but lucky with a Giant, in particular, the propel can be so light, so it actually ends up making sense. But if you have an aero bike that's not super light, then you could probably use the TT bike, because then
same
yeah,
weight.
there's so much math going on. There's a lot of math. There's a lot of testing that we have to do and reruns and different wheels and yeah, fun times.
What's the GC goal, mate?
The main aim is to race from the front of the GC group the whole way through the tour, pretty much. Breakaways are an excellent way to move up on GC nowadays because often, Jonas and Tadej can be so far in front, just so much watts per kilo. So often that breakaway chance actually comes up. I remember Simon finished 4th a couple of years ago, Simon Yates, and he was in a break with Felix, the stage that he won up to Col de Los. And he was in a break and finished 4th. Pau Bilbao was in that break and he finished 6th. So, those opportunities arise. But the main thing would just be racing from the GC group pretty much every day because the Vuelta obviously kind of cheated with the breakaway. And then same as the Tour in 21, I also cheated because I had the breakaway in team and I won by 5 minutes. And I was 2nd overall and just held on. So the Giro last year, I ran from the GC group. I was a bit sick at the end, sadly, but ran 4th and that was a cool experience. So I wouldn't mind having that same objective for the Tour this year. And man, in terms of what number you finish, it's just about what's the max you've done without screwing up. So I don't really have a fixed number because it's the Tour. It can just. I think you can really mentally kind of screw yourself over if you have a set number and then you don't get it. That can be a trouble. But when you say the GC group and racing from the front, you're clearly going to be in the top 10. So that's obviously a pretty straightforward thing to say. You always want more.
Yeah, I was about to say, what's a failure outside the top 10 then?
Absolutely, yeah. That'd be an unhappy time. 10th would still be an unhappy time. Needs to be single digits.
You want to get on the screen. You want to be on that screen every day. You don't want to be on the 11th spot. No one even knows where you finish then. If you finish 11th, you might as well finish 111th.
Yeah, you may as well pull the plug and then just go all in for a stage win. Because then people will always remember that you won a stage. Whilst 11th, no way. No one cares.
We've got a few listener questions. Should we get into a couple of listener questions and hear what everyone wants to hear?
Sure.
Hey, Ben, it's Daryl from Wollongong. I wanted to ask if you prefer to use racing to improve your fitness leading up to your peak event, or do you prefer to have bigger blocks of training where you can have more control and structure in what you're doing? Thanks, mate.
Definitely you need I prefer the blocks pretty much. altitude camp, controlled environment, very set way of progression rather than being out of your context in a race where you obviously can't control how hard the stage is going to be. You're open to the variables in terms of weather or breakaway days or the race pretty much leading into the big goal, let's call it the Grand Tour, is often in general not so much a fine tune, but it's more of a confidence builder to know I've done my huge block of work. I go to the race to do a couple max efforts with a mini objective of performing for confidence. And obviously, just it's a race. You're contracted to be a bike racer. You have to race. So that's just kind of part of it. And then go into the big goal, pretty much. But I don't like racing to create form because you can't do it nowadays. It's way too hard. People do watts per kilo way too much on mountain stages. So you can't like just race yourself to improve because in the end, you just recover poorly because you're not good enough. And the other guys are just better than you. So you're kind of just hitting your head against the wall.
Do you do race simulation in training to get that sort of different pedal stroke?
Not specifically. I would do definitely duration specific. For example, Mountain TT in the Tour de France. Also, Mountain TT in Tour de Suisse. Pretty similar length, around 30 to 35 minutes. So this week, whilst we're here in Sierra, there'll be a couple tests that we'll do to replicate that, which is rough, but whatever, you got to do it. The only race specific stuff you do would be on the demands of the course. First week of the tour, super punchy, so quite a few 3-minute efforts. Otherwise, very long climbs, so doing quite a lot of 20 to 35-minute climbs here in terms of effort duration. So in the end, you're working the two systems.
All right, that sounds like hell. Let's try one more of these questions.
Hey lads, Dan Jones here, the artist formerly known as Backstage Pass. My question for Ben, 10 years ago at the Giro, Esteban Chavez, he almost won it. He ran second, but I think a big key to that performance was the post-race nutrition. And I used to make them this bowl of rice, soy, salt, honey, tuna, and I used to gauge it of how much effort I felt that rider put in during the day. So if they were on the front giving it all, they got a massive bowl. Modern day nutrition, Ben, feels like it's just too much involvement from scientists. Everything's weighed, all your carbs are in a bottle. I want to know, how's this go on the guts? And do you think you'd perform better if I was back making the Jonesy specials?
In terms of post-race nutrition, you're probably not, in terms of the bowl, just a big old bowl, you're probably not too far off what you have in general now, to be honest. I think the main change in general has been just from the amount of food that you eat on the bike. The post situation, I think, it hasn't really changed that much. For sure, mine is weighed, so I normally have a pre-packaged like box, let's call it, of pasta in general. So yeah, I think the post race meal, you can kind of really on a big day go ham and you'll never really overdo it. The only time where you're gonna overdo it in the post race situation is at dinner. Because then you have a mad meal and then you're just sitting in bed in a bit of a coma, just trying to digest all the food. Because the race finishes at 5 o'clock. By the time you get to the bus, you start eating. It's 5:45, and you have dinner at 8:30, and it's a pretty short time frame. So yeah, I reckon the Jonesy Special Bowl would still work in modern day cycling. But yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to have salt and honey too much. It doesn't really sound that appetizing.
And tuna and
tuna
soy
as well.
sauce.
Yeah, it had to be. Yeah.
He's taking credit for Esteban's success there, isn't he?
Exactly. The mastermind behind it all.
The point is, though, a big shift has happened since I left the peloton is, and you mentioned it there, the weighing of the food, the attention to detail with fueling, a much more better understanding of it. Is there a point where it cracks you? Because it doesn't just end at the race. You've got to be onto it. I remember Durbo talking about a lot of riders traveling with scales. So even when they're stopping at the airport, they're weighing their foods and things like that. Is that the extreme it's getting to? And does that sort of crack you, or you just sort of into it? You don't mind?
The airport's that's pretty full on. I haven't seen that before. So I would love to know who that is. But in terms of the weighing, often it's not so much about limiting how much you're eating. It's about making sure you're having enough. You'd be surprised how much rice, for example, or potatoes you have to eat to get the amount of carb that's required. Potatoes in particular, you think that you've eaten like a shit ton of potatoes, but in the end, actually, in terms of a carb amount, it's not that much compared to having pasta, for example. So yeah, I think that that's one of the key things that it's used for rather than limitation. The only time when that's handy is easier days, easier endurance days, and rest days, but that's more so in training. Um, and that's where it can be quite interesting. That's when it becomes restrictive, and you're like, "Oh, this sucks." But it doesn't really crack me too much because in the end, it's performance. It's your job, and if your job is to be the leader of the team and to perform and be in the top five of GC races or stage races and of Grand Tours, then in the end, that's your obligation. It's what you're paid to do, and that's it, and that's that.
It's full on. Full on. Have a listen to this one.
G'day, Ben. It's Tim here from Wangaratta. Just wanted to know who the most genuine person in the peloton is, besides your teammates. Cheers.
Oh, here we go. Who is it, Ben? Who's the most genuine person in the peloton?
That's actually really
Can't be
tricky.
teammate.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I was going to say Durbo because he's probably the most genuine you could probably find, but now we're teammates, so it doesn't really count. It's really tricky because I think if you know the bike racing mentality is slightly funny. You can be a great bloke off the bike and then be like a terrible person on the bike. So it can be quite a tricky thing to build some relationships kind of with. I think someone who's pretty genuine, I would say, would maybe be, I mentioned him before, would be either Rafa Micah or Geraint Thomas.
Mm.
I think G probably is a good example of a pretty genuine guy. He's very honest with himself. He's pretty honest with the team. He's a selfless worker when he's in that role, and he's an excellent leader when he's in that role. So I'd probably say, yeah, I'd probably say G. He doesn't really try and fake it or tell stories, or he's pretty honest and through. So maybe I'd say G.
Nice. Nice.
I was just watching the coverage the other day and heard the guys talking about the time trial in the Giro and just wondering what the go is. They said about being some riders, it's a day off or a rest day. Just want to know what that means in terms of numbers and effort. Like what is a day off or a rest day in a time trial in a Grand Tour? And the other part of the question is same sort of thing. Is there any times you look through the entire profile of the race and say, all right, I'm going to pencil in a rest day or easy day on stage 7 and I'm not doing bugger all on that day? Anyway, love the podcast. Thanks, boys.
Easy days in time trials. Don't know. Have you ever experienced that?
2020 Giro, there was a TT in Prosecco kind of area, and I did do a very easy TT that day. So, yeah, I have done it once or twice before.
What does it actually mean?
Well, what is time cut normally for a TT? Somewhere between 20 and 30%, pretty much. And then you just figure out the math of, right, how slow can I then go? What is the time difference? So let's say the winner would do for a 40-minute TT, I don't know, maybe at let's say 70 kilos, he probably does on average 420 watts, something like that. The bigger guys, they do a lot. But that's 70 kilos. I mean, Tarling, I think he did 450. So the TT from Luca to Pisa, which is unreal. So then you just try and do the math. You're like, well, then in terms of speed, there'll be a little like algorithm the team would have, and maybe it ends up being with your CDA 350 watts that you would have to do, or 330. And then that's kind of then your easy day. So the boys still have to push, but you're not doing nothing. I think it's one thing that's funny with speed is that the faster you go, the harder it is to push more speed, obviously. It becomes exponentially harder. So the difference to gain speed from 400 to 450 watts is quite difficult compared to 350 to 400. So you still move quickly, having an easier TT day, but yeah, it's not too bad. That's why you don't see guys get time cut out of TTs because it's always achievable. The only difference would be the mountain TT, where I know a lot of sprinter guys will actually be going full because, yeah, they will be going full on the mountain TT in the Tour because you got no choice. The time difference is still 20%, but at the end of it, you have gravity that's not against your side as a guy who's trying to go easy. So yeah, those guys will be going full on those days. And
Do you look ahead and do you pick out days you can ride easy and recover and things like that?
normally you would have that probably in your mind, but it depends on your job and your requirements. Yeah. So like if you have a sprinter and then you also have a GC guy, there's probably not too many days where you can pull the plug and say, look, I'm doing absolutely nothing today. It really depends on how your team is composed. You can often relegate one guy so he does work early and then he gets out of there because then the following day is perfect for him. But it's one thing that gets called upon really depending on the race situation. But if you don't have a GC guy, then absolutely a lot of the sprinter teams, for example, would pull the plug as early as they can within reason, and then just try not to waste any energy at all and just roll on in because they can afford to do it because there's no other team objective to head for. So yeah, it is team basis, but yeah, plenty of guys do that.
I think it's a funny concept. We talk about having, or you guys talk about having easy days in the race, yet you're still doing 5-6 hours. So to get people's heads around that, it's just yes, it's still a race, and yes, you're still pushing, but when you become so attuned to it and the level of going hard, yeah, you're still tapping into it at few moments, but you're never going up and over that limit, are you?
No, because in the end, most races you're affected by how many times you go over your threshold in general. And it kind of only has so many coins you can use before that starts to have a negative effect. And that can be for the total duration of the race as well. Some people have a better capacity than others. So that's a pretty key part of Grand Tour racing, of looking after yourself when the team allows you to be able to do that. But yeah, I think if you have a GC guy, it's a pretty tricky thing to be able to do. The most effective thing is pretty much once you've done your job, pull the plug, then go easy. So they've gone full up until that point, to run into the climb, halfway up the climb, whatever the situation is, and then ride as easy as possible to the finish line within reason. Because less calories you burn, which is the main thing. So the fueling isn't so difficult after the stage, and the next day you're no longer in as much of a deficit. That's why GC is so difficult because it just wears you down.
You're always in a deficit. You can never recover.
Hey Mitch, love the podcast. Got a question for you both. When you have intense climbs, is there a particular track that helps motivate you?
Do you tap into a tune? Do you ever get like an earworm?
In training, yes, sometimes. Depends on what
With
you're
a
listening
headphone?
to.
Oh, you actually get an earworm.
No, like an earworm, not headphones. I don't never trained with headphones. Only sometimes here at these training camps because you've got like an hour and a half climb, hour 20 back up to the hotel or to the apartment. So it gets a little boring sometimes. But no, I would say, as you said, intense climbing. No, definitely not. You focus completely on breathing. Breathing's like the key. It regulates your heart rate and you create the rhythm that you need. Whilst listening to a song, I feel breaks the rhythm because you have the bass that's off tune to your breathing or your heart rate, and you don't control your breathing as well. Pretty much is the main thing. So I try not to have a song stuck in my head because it just makes me not focused on what I'm trying to do, which is that effort.
That's a good answer, Ben. Really good. I didn't think you were going to have a very scientific answer to it, but it was a great last question here. I think you'll like this one.
Hey guys, Sophie from Northcote here. I know you're into your wines, and I just wondered if you weren't a pro cyclist, do you think you'd do something in the wine industry, or what do you think you'd do if you weren't a cyclist? Is there a secret hobby that we don't know about? Anyway, good luck for the rest of the season. Cheers.
Benny boy, he loves his wines. Tell me about it, mate. Would you be a som? Bloody viticulture? What's the idea?
To be a winemaker, in essence, you're a farmer. So I think that would be a pretty tricky thing to get around. I love the idea of it. I like this. It's not simplicity because it's definitely not simple farming, and you're open to the elements and you have to work on your toes. But yeah, to then be a som means working in hospitality directly, because then you really are working with a lot of people and customers. And I think that's also then a really tricky thing, because you have to be great. You have to be a great people person. You better do that, don't you? Really?
Mm.
So you're imparting knowledge, but then you're serving, and that's something that, like, really, as an athlete, you pretty much never ever do. So it's a completely different, like, way of working. I think it'd be cool to run something along those lines. I always thought that perhaps you could open a wine bar and there'd be some sort of management or create certain wine lists, but in the end, that's also what a som would do. You could be part owner of a winery, that could be fun, but you're not actually technically then the farmer, because obviously then you have to be living wherever the vineyards are. And I guess in Perth, Swan Valley is probably, that's the closest you could be, but you have to be there on the ground in the Swan Valley the whole time. Or you could be down in Margaret River, excellent place to live. That would be fantastic, actually. But you have to go through the whole process once you finish. Yeah, it's something that I always liked the idea of. I'd be highly surprised if I ever went down that kind of alleyway. But it's a way of life that I could look at and be like, I could probably do that. But I'm not a good gardener and I've never farmed anything. So it's one of those ones where you have an interest in love and wine and how it's made and where it comes from and who's done it. But in the end, do I actually want to do that?
Well, I'll leave you with that parting thought. You're about to head out training, and that is going to be your earworm today. Well, maybe not your earworm, your thought. You can ponder on that now.
There's
Are
so
you
many
going to be
fantastic places you could do it. I think Margaret River would be the dream, though. If I could be a winemaker, I'd be down there.
It sounds like you're going to be back in Oz. That sounds great, mate. Well, I hope you can finish off the rest of your training block. Looking forward to seeing you at the tour. Ben, it's been good just chewing the fat with you today, mate. Thank you very much for making time.
No, I've enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Well, there we go. Ben O'Connor on the eve of the Tour de France. The Giro is done and dusted, and the Tour is just around the corner. I loved hearing from you guys, so thanks very much for sending your questions in. I love hearing your voice on the pod and having a chance to answer those questions as well. A big thanks to our major partner, MAP, Saley, and of course, Shocks Headphones. Get across and check out those guys too. You guys for sending those questions in and for listening, Red Bricks Media for putting the episode together, and of course, the Life in the Peloton team behind the scenes. Look out for the Life in the Peloton book if you don't already have yourself one. This is something you need, your handbook to the World Tour that is just about to be re-released and over and available at lifeinthepeloton.com. So guys, until next time, stay tuned. We've got Communique coming up around the corner and, of course, Race Radio with our two boys, Harry and Stu. Until next time, guys, take it easy. Cheers. That iconic music in this episode was composed by none other than the legend, Pete Shelley. Cheers, mate.